On behalf of the Board of Directors, I'd like to present the $15,000 tax-free cash prize and the 2013 Herblock Award to Dan Perkins.
That's not at all precarious. Wow. So you know that thing where you're getting a sort of major once-in-a-lifetime award at the Library of Congress. I always get so nervous. I don't know about you. First and foremost, I want to thank the Herblock Foundation. I'm a little overwhelmed here. Thank you to Marcy and Sarah and everyone else who had anything to do with this. This is just really extraordinary, and I have a hard time expressing how much this recognition means. I need to thank my wife and son for making everything possible. That's good. That covers the moment. Appreciate the help. My wife is awesome. She's always there to help me talk this stuff out, or to come up with an idea of her own. She should probably have a co-credit on this thing, to be honest. My son is 9 years old, and he also is awesome. He recently wrote a picture book about a hamburger and his pet French fry. They get in a war with an apple. I'm hoping I can put him to work writing cartoons before too long. And I need to thank all the editors and publishers who give me space and continue to support my work each week, because without them, I would not be here this evening. So winning a prize named after Herblock is a bit like winning a prize that's named after Einstein or Picasso. It is an honor. It's more than a little humbling. You're probably not going to live up to that. Herblock's career, as most people, I assume, already know, spanned 70 years. He took on the Cold War and the arms race, civil rights, Watergate, gun control, just about any other topic you could think of. The term McCarthyism was coined in a Herblock cartoon. I'm 100% sure I am not going to knock that over. I just want to state that on the record. So I have several of Herblock's books on my shelves, and I was browsing through them in preparation for this evening, and I did come across a couple of quotes that kind of resonated with me that I wanted to share tonight. In a book published in 1958, he wrote of the problems which will face future historians looking back at his era. And he wrote, "In studying our national and international affairs, they're likely to be struck by the paradox of how we could have been so frightened and so complacent both at the same time." This is me again now. He's writing about the Cold War, but that's a pretty accurate description of America in the 12th year of our endless war on terror. He continued on. They're likely to find it curious that as we develop wider and wider means of communication, we seem to have less and less to communicate to each other. They'll find endless speeches about freedom, and perhaps they'll wonder just what we did with all that freedom, or how many of the people who talked about it even knew what it was. Again, all of which could have been written at any point in the past 5 or 10 years. I had the privilege of meeting Herblock at a cartooning conference in 1998 or so. So there seems to be a tradition at these things for the winner to tell their Herblock anecdote. I'm sorry, I wish I had one. We exchanged pleasantries, we shook hands. He seemed like a very nice man. But I am glad. I am glad that our paths crossed. He was close to 90 at that point, a legend in the field, and I was the alt-weekly guy, the weirdo cartoonist who uses too many words. But I would like to think that our goals were pretty similar, to call out injustice and abuses of power, to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, as the saying goes. But my work does come out of a slightly different tradition. Like a lot of cartoonists of my generation, I grew up on Mad Magazine, which I think probably helps explain both my fondness for text-heavy cartooning and my innate suspicion of authority. In retrospect, Mad Magazine, I think, had exactly the impact on my impressionable young mind that the adults around me feared it would. And look where I ended up. And of course, I was profoundly influenced by the artists who trailblazed the alternative weekly path ahead of me. Jules Feiffer, who pretty much invented this genre. Matt Groening, whose Strip Life in Hell made cartoons and alt-weeklies synonymous in the minds of readers. I definitely wouldn't be here if not for those guys. In the early 80s, I was working a succession of, I guess what you'd technically call soul-crushing temp jobs. And the cartoons in the back of the local weekly paper were like a lifeline to a drowning man. They were pushing the boundaries and rewriting the rules, and I saw that stuff and I thought, I want to be a part of that. And I was lucky enough to make that happen and carve out a small space for myself. I've been earning a living as a cartoonist for more than 2 decades, which by her block standards means that I'm just getting started. I've done it solely through self-syndication. I've never had a staff job or institutional support or really any guarantee of continued income whatsoever beyond next week's cartoon. You could say I've been living by my wits alone, but that makes it sound like I've been out in the woods foraging for nuts and berries. The life of a freelancer is not quite that bad, though wearing a suit and tie is more than a rarity for me. I work at home. I get up in the morning and make some coffee and go into my studio. This is the first time I've worn pants in several weeks. I'm kidding about that in case anyone's worried. I want to be clear, I often wear pants. But it's a strange job. As political cartoonists, we annoy people for a living, kind of like those guys that dress up like Elmo in Times Square. Though honestly, I think those guys have better long-term career prospects. If I had a dime for every time someone has told me over the past 20 years that cartoons are the first thing they turn to in a publication, I would have a very large pile of dimes, which could come in handy the way things are going. The transition from print to digital has not been an unmixed blessing for political cartoonists. In some ways, it's been great. We're no longer confined by the geography of physical print. Our reach is global. We've got more readers than ever. Unfortunately, the coin of the realm is still mostly exposure, which is to say the opportunity to work for free in order to possibly get another opportunity to work for free. There are some exceptions. Marcos Moulitsas at Daily Kos has been a steadfast supporter of political cartooning, and I thank him sincerely for that. Sites like Truth Out in the Nation are keeping cartoons in the mix as well. And my friend Matt Worker, who's probably here tonight, has an actual staff job at a website over at Politico, which makes him a rare and mythical creature, like a unicorn or the Loch Ness Monster. If you catch a glimpse of him tonight, be sure to snap a photo. But there's a lot of sites that you'd expect to run political cartoons that just don't. And I guess it makes sense. Generic stock photography is probably cheaper. And in poll after poll, if there's one thing readers say they enjoy most of all, it's generic stock photography. Wait, I'm sorry, I got that mixed up. It's actually cartoons. I also think there's a culture gap between the word people running these sites and the image people, though I'm clearly doing my best to bridge that particular divide. If you think about it, cartoonists actually have to do most of what writers do in terms of researching an idea and constructing an argument and thinking it through. And then on top of that, we have to find a way to convey the point we want to make through some clever visual metaphor or some combination of pictures and words. Some of us with more words than others. But you know what they say about Ginger Rogers? She did everything Fred Astaire did, except backwards and in high heels. I think that's true of political cartoonists, especially the so-called alternative cartoonists. We do everything political columnists do, except backwards and in high heels. I explained about how I work at home alone all day. I always start with the words. I sit down at my desk and try to articulate my thoughts on gun control or drone warfare or reproductive rights or whatever the topic may be, and then try to figure out how to translate that argument into the setting of a parallel universe or put it into the mouths of the tentacle-waving aliens of Planet Glocks, who, for example, deal with their entitlement cutbacks by leaving the elderly and infirm on the northernmost plains to be consumed by the great and terrible beasts which roam there. On Glocks, the debate is over precisely how many elderly and infirm should be abandoned in the name of austerity, which is more or less the debate we're having here, filtered through the lens of satire. I might just make it through the evening. And speaking of satire, human beings are tribal creatures. We divide the world into teams and root for our own side, but that's not how satire works. Satire is about probing the spots that bother you, whether or not they're conveniently partisan, which is not to say that we don't take sides. Strongly held opinions are at the very core of what we do. But satire which values partisanship over truth is not satire at all, but rather propaganda. And there's a reason that propagandist is not a job title that anyone wears with pride. So sometimes a reader will write to say that a cartoon on a given topic is depressingly accurate, or that they would laugh if they weren't busy crying. I guess they mean these things as compliments, and what cartoonist doesn't strive to inspire tears of existential futility? But I hope they laugh anyway, because that's the whole point of this job. It's a two-pronged assault. There are a lot of things in this world that you need to be outraged about, but outraged unchecked by laughter will eat you up inside. You need to laugh, and that's where we come in. So I was rehearsing this speech in front of my 9-year-old, who took a few notes, which I thought would be useful as a closing summary. So to quote verbatim, "Thanks, people. In book, guy writes about problems. Weirdo with too many words, grew up on Mad, lucky to be a cartoonist, works at home, often wears pants." I don't even want to suggest that I have a chance of living up to Herb Bloch's legacy, because that's not in the cards, but I do promise to remain inspired by the example he set and to keep doing the best work that I can do. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Drinks are on me.